Good evening, Broncos country, and welcome to another installment of the Orange and Blue View. I'm one of your hosts, Ron White. This direction here is Thomas Hall, and we have just wrapped up, or I guess the Broncos have just wrapped up the 2023 NFL draft. So, we'll get into everyone's thoughts on what they think, how the draft went, if the Broncos did improve their roster, if we did miss out on some key positions, and so on and so forth. But first, we want to welcome in you guys here to the chat, and we do see a few comments here. Got Dominique Martin coming in here. Thank you, Dominique, for your comments. We appreciate you as always. He says, MHH, you guys are great. Thank you for covering the draft. Broncos family, how are we feeling about the picks? MHH for life. Salute to our MHH ladies. Go Broncos. Again, thank you, Dominique. And we will definitely be talking about all things draft and all of these players that the Broncos select. How are you doing, Thomas?
Doing good, man. It was fun. It was exciting. I can't wait to talk about the picks. There was a lot of surprises, obviously. I mean, I, for one, thought they were going to go a little bit different direction, and that's what makes the NFL draft so much fun. You never know what's going to happen, and then you never know how they're going to pan out. So, yeah, we're going to jump into each of the draft picks. We're going to talk about the trade and whether it was a good value or not. Talk about, maybe what the roster is going to look like. I think we've got a lot to talk about. It's going to be fun. So, yeah, thank you for everybody jumping in to the chat. Appreciate it. Ask your questions, fire away. We'll see if we can answer them. But yeah, it's been a blast. I mean, Mile High Huddle has been, on it all 3 days leading up to it. Even we're jumping on to recap the whole thing. So yeah, Mile High Huddle had you covered. So yeah, thank you so much for coming in, Dominic. Appreciate it. We got a couple others coming in. Jetty Splash is here already asking about centers, so that's great. David Youngkin in already with saying with only 5 draft picks, we went defensive player and a receiver and a center. I give them a solid B for what they had to work with. So thanks for coming in, David. Really appreciate that, and we'll start grabbing some others in here as we see them coming in. We got Jetty Splash coming back in. We got William Cantellanos coming in saying probably going to be Cush starting, sadly, but at least there will be competition for it, and we have a depth at least, if anything. Still wanted a center early, but it just didn't happen that way. Yeah, William, we're kind of in the same boat. Ron and I, we talked about this, thinking center was a big position of need. The funny thing is back right as free agency started and there was that frenzy, I kind of wrote, I wrote an article thinking that Sean Payton kind of thought that he liked Lloyd Cushenberry, must be coming out of college, thinks he can fix him. And that's kind of who they are going with. I mean, I know that they drafted a center at the final draft pick that they had, but that's a developmental position. So it does look like Cushenberry is going to be the starter, and we will keep our fingers crossed that he is going to improve dramatically under Sean Payton and in that coaching staff's tutelage. What do you think, Ron? I mean, you think that was a mistake to not go center early?
Yeah, first, before I answer the question, I do want to give a shout out to all the MHH guys for the draft coverage. I know Nick Kendall, Eric Trickle, Lance Anderson, those guys, Carl Dummler as well. I know everyone was heavily on all nights and during the afternoon. So shout out to them for excellent draft coverage. And I agree. Well, it's yes. I'm surprised that the Broncos did not prioritize center earlier. Now I know Sean Payton mentioned that you know Cushenberry was going to be the starter, and I believe he mentioned that, Thomas, just because. Well, who else do you have, right?
Yeah,
He has to kind of be solid and affirming that that is their starting center and they can work with what they have. Now, I do like the fact that they did bring one in. Granted, it was the last round and Alex Forsyth. I do see this more as competition for Cush for sure, because there could be, in camp competition with Cushionberry and Forsyth. And if Forsyth looks better, then if Forsyth wins the better, if wins the starting position, then he can definitely start.
absolutely.
And also the future as well, right? I do see now. I don't think Forsyth is going to start this year. Unfortunately, it's going to be Cushionberry, I believe. But I think the Broncos are also looking at it from a future perspective too of, we don't see Cushionberry as the long-term answer to center. So let's draft this developmental guy, see what he can become, and hopefully he can be that starting center, that we want. Now, Forsyth is great. I've seen some tape. He's a steady run blocker, pretty good in pass protection. But we'll see what happens, as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Competition is always good. So they grabbed a center at some point, which they needed to do. So they needed to work on their offensive line a little bit. They needed some depth for sure across every position. The nice thing about Forsyth is he's had experience at other positions too. He's played guard, he's played offensive tackle in a reserve role. And Jeff Schwartz tweeted out, shortly after that pick was made, said he really liked him, said it was a great pick, and he thinks he's going to play for 10 years. So that's promising. You got an ex NFL offensive lineman singing your praises. That's great. Appreciate it. That's a nice kind of feel good moment for a seventh rounder. But we got Phil McLaughlin coming in from Facebook saying, "Good evening, Thomas and Ron. We got a center. Seemed like a good solid B grade. LOL. Buckham. Go Broncos." Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to try and grade it. I hate grading drafts. I know it's fun and everything, but you never know what they're going to do. But we're going to definitely talk about each of these picks for sure. Obviously center was hot on the topic, but I think trading up in the second round to go after a wide receiver was a surprise. I actually think that all three of the first picks and maybe even the fourth pick are going to see extensive playing time because they're going to be playing a lot of special teams. I think that the second round Mims at wide receiver, the punt returner, I think I think you got him at the punt returner, and then you got 2 to 3 pretty fast guys for their size going, playing in coverage. So let's jump into your thoughts on Marvin Mims Jr. and what you thought about that pick.
Yes. So for Marvin Mims, at first, I wasn't the biggest fan. I'm going to be honest, just because I didn't see wide receiver being, the biggest need for this team. But when I looked at the tape at Oklahoma and what Marvin Mims can do, the explosion, the speed for his size. A very small slot receiver, but he can definitely challenge defenses vertically. Um, good ball tracking ability, tight coverage and contested catches, how Oklahoma used him. So I envision him, with this Sean Payton offense within some play designs, right, being leveraged. Now, to your point, I can definitely see him being more used on the special teams as well, maybe for starters, and, definitely helping out on that side of the ball just because it's been bad all along. But definitely a good wide receiver, a solid, explosive wide receiver to use in some packages for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like it. Yeah, I just want to say hi to everybody jumping in. Gage is jumping in there. Mike S is here. We had Greg Smith jumping in. Really appreciate you guys popping in to say hello. We got David Yost coming in. He big quite a long comment here. I'm going to read it real quick. Daniel Yost, good evening, Thomas and Ron. What are your thoughts on our 2023 draft class? And do you guys like the new tight end that we acquired from the Saints that played under Coach Sean Payton in the Big Easy? I absolutely love this year's draft picks, and especially adding another tight end that knows Sean Payton's offensive scheme. Let's go Broncos, Broncos country. Let's ride. Yeah, thanks, Daniel, for popping in. Appreciate that. Yeah, we're gonna get to all that for sure. I actually, it's interesting about this draft for me, Ron. I didn't expect it, but I still kind of like it. Right? It wasn't. If I were picking, I would have wanted to go with the center, to shore up those spots. But I'll tell you, the Mims pick has put. I think KJ Hamler's probably gone. In this, from what we understand, is this pick is a little more durable, but still has the same top end. I mean, the guy can fly. He's got speed. He can return punts. He can, they can put him into some of the offensive packages and get him some playing time. He's probably not going to be, coming out playing a lot as a rookie, but he's going to play some. And, if he's durable, if he's more durable than KJ Hamler, then I think KJ Hamler's, pretty much on notice, and he may be a part of a trade package. We'll see. But yeah, I kind of, even though I didn't like that they went wide receiver. I like the pick itself, and the trade up wasn't too bad, right? They didn't have to trade up a whole lot. In fact, when you look at the loss in value of the probability of actually hitting on a player from what you traded, with the picks that you traded, it was kind of a wash, and they picked a player at a position that usually pans out more than any other position in the second round, and that's wide receiver. So I didn't mind the trade itself. I know they didn't have a lot of picks to work with, but they still ended up with 5 picks, and they got another player too. So they really wound up with 6 players from this draft. So I kind of liked it, right? Even though it was a surprise, I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
And the other piece too that I want to say before is, Marshall Washington also, his job's in jeopardy as well. And Gage is saying that. All right, Gage is saying that. So you got two young players who are kind of coming up, hopefully to be part of that team, may not be around much longer. They may package them up and send them somewhere.
Yeah, and thank you, Gage. And I was just going to say this, Gage, of not only KJ Hamler, but yeah, also Montreal Washington, because of what Mims can bring on the special teams, as well with KJ Hamler. I've seen in Oklahoma with Mims that vertical speed to challenge the defense. Right, that's why the Broncos initially drafted KJ Hamler, to be that speedy receiver, that speedy threat. But as we know, KJ Hamler just can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
So if you're not on the field, you can't produce. We can't see it come to fruition. And this pick screams Sean Payton, because in his
Yeah.
offense, he definitely loves to use that vertical, speedy threat. And it's going to be exciting to watch, Thomas, of Cortland Sutton with Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick and now Marvin Mims in some of these packages, right? So
That's right.
it's definitely going to be an exciting offense to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you totally, and I actually you hit the nail on the head. When this draft unfolded, we were kind of saying if they trade back and kind of be conservative, you could probably feel like George Payton's in more in charge. But if they get aggressive and they go after the players they want, it's got Sean Payton's fingerprints all over it, and that's what we saw. They didn't fool around. They went after the picks that they wanted, and they went out to get them, and they traded what they needed to do. And I like Michael Davis coming here, not just because you're giving us a super chat and supporting us. I appreciate it. I think it's a great question, Michael. Gents, he says, do you see a scenario where Jewell and Sanders can coexist on the roster? I'm a huge fan of both. I hope we have plans for both. MHH. I have a lot of opinions on the Sanders pick. I actually I didn't like that they were picking a linebacker, but I love the guy. He's a great player. Some people even had, draft pundits had him ahead of Jack Campbell, who was taken way earlier, right? The guy he's got speed, he's got size, he's got versatility. And I tweeted out, I said, this is who I thought they were gonna this is a guy who they can use in multiple spots. Like I thought they could actually do with Baron Browning last year. So he's versatile. He can cover. I think he's a little bit lacking on the instincts, as an inside linebacker, but not bad. He's not lost out there. So I think it's a good pick. My only problem with it is Isaiah Simmons was supposed to be a generational talent coming in who could go play in many spots, and I don't think Vance Joseph really brought the best out of him. So that's the only issue that I do have, but I think he's a good pick. I think he's one of the best linebackers in the draft. And I think early on, he's going to play a lot of special teams, and he's going to come in and, different packages where he can move around and kind of fool the defense a little bit. And I do think that Jewell and Sanders can coexist. I mean, Singleton is a tackling machine, but, Jewell has been struggling with injuries. So yeah, I like the pick. Ron, what do you think about the pick?
I love this pick. I think I've been I might have been the minority, but I've been one of those guys that have been screaming for a coverage inside linebacker. I'm a big inside linebacker fan. And when I watch Drew Sanders on film, how he's flying around, he's a tackling machine, he's good in coverage. And in certain packages, he can come up and rush the passer. I think this is exactly what Denver needed. And Michael, again, thank you for your question. To answer the question of can both coexist? Yes, they can. And I do see maybe for the next year or two them coexisting on this roster for sure. And to Thomas, to your point, I see Sanders coming in, yet mostly as the special teams player, but in certain situations, do expect him on the field, maybe on second and third down with some of those pressure packages, as Sean Payton mentioned yesterday, coming in and making an impact. But yeah, I think this for the next in the short term, right? For the next year or two, I definitely see them coexisting. But I also see after maybe that second year, the Broncos moving on from Jewel just because the injury bug, right? Jewel does have that extensive injury history, and we know with Sanders, I don't think he has many injuries, and he can probably stay healthy and be on the field. So
Yeah, and look at it this way, right? He's the backup right now who can come in and he can rush the passer from all sorts of different spots. He can drop into coverage. He can play inside linebacker. So you've got a multi-purpose tool there. But Josie Jewell, his contract's up after the end of this year. He's an unrestricted free agent.
yeah.
So they're going to need to they got to replace him anyway. So yeah, they can coexist for a year. He can learn a little bit, and then he can slide into that spot where Josie Jewell vacates, because Josie Jewell will, like I said, unrestricted free agent in 2024. So I like the pick. I don't like taking an inside linebacker there again, because I was hoping for more offensive line, getting someone on the offensive line, but it's a pick that they loved. And, like I said, some people had even almost a first to second round grade on him. To get him in the third is great value. It's great value, even for the position in my mind. Even though the inside linebacker that position is kind of diminishing, it's still a really good value for who they got and where they got him.
Yes, agreed. And we have Miguel coming in here. Stan Stevenson. Thank you, Miguel, for your comment here. We appreciate you. He says, "Evening, fellas. Didn't care for the safety pick. Wish we would have gotten a defensive tackle." Yes, Miguel, I 100% agree. The again, Skinner he's a solid safety, right? I looked at his film, 65 tackles last year. He's good in coverage, 4 interceptions. But I think where we were picking and what the Broncos needed, I just didn't think safety was the pick. I was more on the train of center and defensive lineman. We definitely should have addressed the defensive line in this draft. I think that's why, and we may get into some grades here a little later, but that's why I graded this a little bit lower, just because the defensive line wasn't addressed, edge wasn't addressed either, and then how they prioritize the center. Again, I'm glad that they picked one eventually, but just their priority and where they think center falls didn't align with me. But I definitely, your point's not lost here. I definitely agree that we should have at least addressed the defensive line in this draft for sure.
I'll kind of disagree with you a little bit. I think they need some rotation on the defensive line, but they already have young and inexperienced players that they're counting on. Right? They've got Henningsen, who played quite a bit last year. They got Uwazurike. He's, they're going to count on him. They actually need more experienced rotation in my mind. I think they should bring in a free agent that's still sitting out there. They don't need another inexperienced defensive tackle. That's from my perspective. I mean, it's still, they need to fill out that rotation, right? I also think that safety was a need. They only had 4 safeties on the roster. That, that's your 4 people that make the roster. You got to have at least camp bodies. So I don't mind that they went safety there. I don't mind the pick either, right? He was going to be picked higher, but he ended up getting he had to leave the Senior Bowl early because he had a death in the family, so he didn't get to showcase it. But the little bit that he did show, he was showing really well. I mean, Luke Patterson, another MHHer who was out there, loved the guy, loved how he played. And then he injured his pec. He tore his pec training, for the so he didn't get to test. He didn't get to do all of that. So that's what dropped him. But for the most part, if he'd have been able to test and stay at the Senior Bowl, most likely he would have been rated much higher. And I think they actually got kind of a good value on him as well. I actually like the pick for the fact that he can sit and learn behind Justin Simmons, play some special teams, and be that guy, hopefully, that can replace Justin Simmons in a couple of years, because Justin Simmons is, he's been in the league quite a while now. It doesn't seem like it, but he's been in the league since 2016. He's getting older. They may decide to move on to another, younger player, and this might be the guy. I don't know. I mean, we're going to have to watch and find out, but I think that he would have been picked higher and had more value than where they got him if he had been able to go through all that testing. Because what I understand, he's a fairly fast run. I mean, not blazing speed safety, but I think he was supposed to run in like the 4.55, which is pretty fast. It's funny. I find that funny. Like 4.5 to me, when I was young, was like blazing speed, but now we're like, 4.5. It's not slow. It's crazy how fast his players have gotten. But yeah, so that's been the problem with him kind of dropping. But yeah, I do agree with you, Miguel. They need to do something on the defensive tackle front, but I think they need to go find someone with a little more experience. I think they got the young guys that they like. So we'll see what happens. There's still some out there that they can go grab, but yeah, I mean, we'll find out. Hopefully Luke was maybe going to jump on with us if he could, if his schedule allowed, to kind of talk. He could talk a little bit about what he saw with Skinner, but yeah, he really liked him. So, he was watching him in person at the Senior Bowl. So that gives me hope that this kid is got the tools to really make it in the NFL.
Yep. Okay.
And they also went out and got, they got a cornerback, and some people were projecting him as safety as well. So they kind of really went out and shored up that secondary where it was a little thin in the depth. So I kind of like it. I mean, they went out, Demetrius is coming in saying PFF graded Riley Moss as the best corner in college, just ahead of Devin Witherspoon. That's a surprise to me. I don't want to get on my soapbox about PFF. I don't really care for their grading. I think they got great stats. I don't really trust some of their grades, but I mean, obviously people liked him. So what are your thoughts on Riley Moss, Ron?
Yeah, Riley Moss I like the pick. I saw him. Our guy. 46 tackles, 2 forced fumbles, and for where the Broncos got him, I mean, I thought it was a good value, a good ball hawk. Definitely shoring up that corner room. So I think this was a good pickup for sure. Just showing up that secondary. And to your point on the Skinner pick, I agree that safety is a need. I just think for me, it's just defensive lineman is a bigger need. And that's why it should have been prioritized in the draft. Now, it's interesting to see. It'll be, if you guys have some of the undrafted free agents, as they're trickling in, please drop them. I haven't had a chance to look at who the Broncos got yet, but
no, they got an edge. They did grab an edge. Preliminary. They can always change, but Thomas Incon, I think, out of Central Michigan. So they get an edge. They picked up an edge, an offensive lineman, and a cornerback so far that I've seen. I haven't checked since we got on, but they're still looking for edge. I'm going to just grab this one because I think it's funny. It's Lawrence, the guy. You're here all the time, so I appreciate it. It's talking about he's enjoying a pickle juice popsicle, which I've never heard of that before. I hope it's good. I actually drink pickle juice once in a while because I it's good to replenish the electrolytes. But he's over here just experimenting with homemade popsicles, and he can definitely recommend it. So there you go. If anyone wants to try it out, we already have a tester, Lawrence. So thanks for being here. I appreciate it, Lawrence. And we got Mike S coming in. Why didn't we pick an edge in this draft? He says, Mike says, can Sanders play edge? Well, Sanders did play edge a little bit, and he switched positions. I actually, this is my thoughts on edge, right? And I may be in the minority here, but with edge, I want an impact player. Right. I don't think they needed to grab somebody that they could develop because they have Randy Gregory and they have Baron Browning. If they can stay healthy, I think their starters are set. And that's a big if. That's a huge if. But to replace someone like Randy Gregory, if he can't stay healthy, I think you got to be farther up in the draft to really get that guy. And so grabbing somebody in the mid rounds, hoping that he's going to develop, I don't know. I just don't think that they could step in right away and make that impact if Randy Gregory goes down. So but you're right. Edge is a need. They need to plan for the future. I just don't know if they can find that, like I said before, it's like that's a hard position to find in the mid to later rounds. I know there are examples of it, but there's a pile of them that didn't work out. So it's kind of hard to find it. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think Sanders has played edge before.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for your question. And yeah, Sanders has played some edge, and you know, again, moving him around a lot of those pressure packages that Sean Payton mentioned last night in the presser. We can definitely see Vance Joseph views him, on the edge inside. So that's part of his versatility. But I agree, Thomas, that we definitely need that day one starter, that true impact player in the event that Randy Gregory and or Baron Browning does go down. Because who do you have? I mean, think about it. We should have learned our lesson from last year of Nick Benito, right? We took Nick Benito
Right.
in the third round last year, and we see what he is. Granted, I know it's only a year in, but we definitely need someone higher up in the draft to make that true impact. So,
Yeah.
Again, while it's still a need, and I'm still a little disappointed that they didn't address it a little early on. It's one of those things where you have to look at, their numbers and can they be an impact player at this point.
Yeah, and hopefully Benito turns into that, right? That's been the plan, right? Everybody knew he was a project a little bit. He needed to add strength and get some more pass rushing moves, but he has athleticism. He could be that guy that makes that second year leap and becomes that player that they were hoping for in the second round when they drafted him. So that's possible. And let's hope that happens, because I don't want that to be a wasted pick. Just want to say hi to Michael Ronquillo, the legend, is in the house, saying good evening, Thomas Hall and Ron White on Orange and Blue View. Go Broncos and Buckham. Thank you for being here, Michael. We always appreciate it, and we always appreciate the support for sure. So thank you. Thank you for being here. And we got Pearl Heater jumping in, saying hi, and with a comment of finally drafted a center. Yes, finally they did after all that projection that I don't know, most people projected them getting a center, and they finally got one, but just wasn't as early as we all thought it was going to be.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. So what do you think? I mean, Riley Moss to me is an intriguing pick. I don't know. I mean, it's an intriguing pick to me. We'll grab this. But before I get into my thoughts on Riley Moss, let's grab this from Michael Davis, and he says, if we're smart, Sanders could play a role similar to Parsons. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I was talking to somebody, maybe Parsons light. I don't think he's that impactful, right? But he could be. Who knows? But yeah, some multi-purpose tool. You can move him around. Like I said early on, though, I have my doubts that Vance Joseph has it in him to do that. Like I said, with Isaiah Simmons, who they got in the first round, is supposed to be that multi-talented, multi-purpose tool that they can move around. And he really never, it might be some on him and it might be some on Vance Joseph, or it just didn't work out. He just didn't seem to really bring that out in him. And I also, Will Parks is supposed to be a utility guy that was on the Broncos when Vance Joseph was there. And I remember him using him as an inside linebacker on a goal line stand. Like, I'm like, why are you doing that? So I have my doubts that I hope Vance Joseph can actually have it in him to make that role for him. It's just, I have that kind of doubt in the back of my mind. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, Michael, that's what I want. That's what I would desire of Sanders being Parsons like. That's his ceiling. When you look at Sanders on tape, it's the ability in space with the tackling of linebackers, coming up on the blitz, pressure packages, sacking. Again, it's that ability to be moved around in multiple ways. But Thomas, this is where I do agree with you of, will Vance Joseph get that out of him? Is Vance Joseph the person to move him around in that capacity to get that out of him? Obviously, with Parsons, you have a defensive genius mind like Dan Quinn, but will Vance Joseph do the same? And the potential is there, but we just have to see it come to fruition of, in certain scheme and packages, will Vance Joseph use him as such?
Yeah. I don't know. And we got Mike S coming here saying these guys need to be a lot better than last year's class. It's funny. People are giving last year's class a bad rep, right? They didn't really step up. But if you think about it, this year those players are going to have to step up, right? So they're going to have to make some hay this year. Benito's going to have to play a bigger role. So that's you might be grading him a little differently if he makes that next step. You've got Damari Mathis, who's going to be a starter. He's the starter opposite Pat Surtain, and he looked pretty good by the end of the year. I like that pick. Dulcich is going to play a big role as he's probably going to be the starting tight end. And we'll talk about the tight end that they traded for, but most likely he's going to be the starting tight end. Then you've also got to think about, you've got the two defensive linemen that I talked about, Henningsen and Wazirike, who are going to have to be big time in the rotation. So once we get down the road in next year, and we're talking about this 2022 draft, it's either they're going to have to really step up, and then we're going to be looking at that draft in a better light, or they're going to fail, of course, and then we'll be like, yeah, it was bad. They didn't really pan out as rookies, but I think they have potential to really step up. So you might see some pretty good players come out of that draft.
Yeah, Mike, and also, we have a change from last year, which is the coaching. So, new coach on deck with Sean Payton. We will get the best out of these now second-year players with competency at coaching in place. So that's across the board, right? Offense, defense. As you mentioned, Thomas, Damari Mathis was, he had his curve, but he was great last year. I liked what I saw. Uzurike, Henningsen, they have to take that next step. Benito, we'll see what comes. But I was mildly encouraged with what I saw last year. But again, with coaching not good, it kind of leaves a lot to be desired.
Sure.
On last year, but we'll definitely see a step up this year. And I think the players that the Broncos got this year, I think that they're in a good position to succeed at least from the start. And again, some of them we will see on the special teams unit. Some we will have some starting snaps as well. So.
Yeah. Just want to grab Chad Beach here coming in from Facebook saying, evening fellows, Broncos country. It's that linebacker we got going to be is that linebacker we got going to be a good player? What's your thoughts on that pick? Yeah, we had just been talking about him. We both really like him with the versatility. We're worried that Vance Joseph may not bring that, thought process of really moving him around and using him as a multi-purpose tool. But he looks like he's going to be more than likely going to be taking over for Josie Jewell when he becomes an unrestricted free agent after the season. So we like the pick. We think he's, he was a good value where he was taken because a lot of people rated him much higher. In fact, I saw one draft pundit rated him higher than Jack Campbell, who went in the first round. So it was a good value for sure. And we're kind of high on him. Hopefully he proves us right.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. And yeah, I'm definitely high on Drew Sanders. Again, I give that a good grade. Just because again, it really wasn't a huge need, but I think personally, I've just been pining for that coverage inside linebacker that can kind of do it all, move all over the place, that dynamic inside linebacker, if you will, and he definitely does fit that bill. So I'm definitely excited about the pick.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for Donnie jumping in and jumping into the chat about Mims. We like the draft picks too. Michael Ronquillo's coming back in. Thank you, Michael, and bringing up the Let's Ride again. So he says one thing safety L.J. Skinner, Broncos NFL draft pick said he says he had to say it. I saw it too. He says Let's Ride, Broncos country, let's ride, go Broncos and buck them. Yeah, it was funny. I think that's cool. I like having a sense of humor. I think it helps people to have fun. So hopefully he has got a sense of humor, but the guy can really, he's a kind of a missile back there. I mean, he can hit, he likes to hit, he wants to hit. And speaking of LJ Skinner, we got Luke Patterson joining us. He's going to hopefully talk to us a little about LJ Skinner. Welcome, Luke. How you doing?
Yo, my guy, JL Skinner, going from one Boise State Broncos crew to another, the best Broncos crew. 5280, man, you guys got a good one. One of my favorite players that I scouted last winter down at the Senior Bowl. This guy is a safety. He's a thumper. He's going to bring the wood. He's going to bring attitude. Do not let his fall in this draft scare you by any means. He had a torn pec a little bit earlier in the offseason. That's why he slid, right, from the second round, where I thought he would go, ultimately for the Broncos to steal him. Talk about value, fellas.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I was saying that he slid. One, he had to leave the Senior Bowl too because of a death in the family. So he didn't even get to show off his skills. He didn't get to test. You know, I think he's probably faster than people might think he is. He seems fast on tape. He seems to like move pretty quick. It was a good pick.
Well, he's a smart cerebral player, right? And what do guys do that don't have 4.3 40s? They make up for it with their brain. Look at Josie Jewell. The man has made a career out of angles. Look at Alex Singleton. I mean, the Bash brothers for the Denver Broncos, as you guys know, they're not the most athletic guys in the world, but they're some damn good football players. And that's what you're getting in JL Skinner. This guy, I get goosebumps even talking about this guy. I'm so impressed with him. I mean, I haven't met a safety or a linebacker that I don't love, but this also screams that our new Iowa cornerback, Riley Moss, he's a corner. He's not going to be playing safety.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I was saying that he might be the Skinner guy, the draft pick might be Justin Simmons' replacement in a few years.
Ooh,
like
man, I see what you're saying, right? Because if you're a Denver Broncos coach, a scout, a GM, you've got to be thinking about the future, right? And some of these guys are getting a little long in the tooth. Justin Simmons isn't one of them, right? He stayed pretty healthy throughout his career. He's been an Ironman for the Denver Broncos, but instead, Kareem Jackson, I'm afraid he's probably not coming back to the Denver Broncos when you look at some of this depth here. Riley Moss is an absolute dog in his own right, but you're getting a guy with some height, something that the Denver Broncos need at the safety position. Why? Because tight end has been killing the Denver Broncos for over half a decade, and I'm done with it. I'm not going to say that JL Skinner's a Travis Kelce killer or anything like that. He's going to need to develop for a couple of years, right? What was the first thing George Payton said about Nick Bonito last year? The guy needs to get in the weight room. Well, JL Skinner needs to get in the weight room too. He needs to add something to those legs. Got some chicken legs right now, but this guy can thump. And covering the tight end has been something that's hard for all NFL teams. I'm frustrated. I'm pissed off that the Broncos can't do it, but at the same time, I think that's going to change. Sean Payton has had a whole year to look at what's been going on in the AFC West. And if you think he's just going to continually roll out the same old thing of maybe a linebacker, maybe a corner on Travis Kelce, things are changing, and JL Skinner's here to put his name on it.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke. And Luke, you getting me excited about Skinner. I mean, I was
baby.
Not as high on the pick as you guys, but you guys are getting me excited. Another question for you, Luke, as far as I know you love Skinner, obviously, but outside of JL Skinner, who else? I guess who else was your favorite pick from the Broncos in this draft?
Yeah, well, man, I was surprised just like everybody, right? I might be the only person in the Denver media to not be giving the Broncos an A+ grade with their first pick at Marvin Mims Jr. I thought wide receiver was a very rich pick, Ron. I mean, Thomas and I have talked about it. We've all talked about it. Everybody. Wide receiver, we're loaded here. What's going to happen with Jerry Jeudy in the 5th-year option? Expect that to be picked up for one of two things. It makes sense. It's good business. And because it's good business, maybe you look at that. I'm not saying that they're shopping him. I'm not saying he's on the trade block, but teams are going to be calling, especially when players get injured in the offseason. They get injured at training camp. Hell, we just watched Tim Patrick go down, season-ending injury, and it kind of ruined all of training camp last year, if we're going to be honest. So Marvin Mims Jr. surprised me. The player that I continue to feel better and better about, Ron, is Drew Sanders out of Arkansas.
Yes.
I keep asking and texting some friends of mine around the league, friends that are connected with Bama, and they kept telling me, Luke, if Bama wasn't so stacked, this guy probably would have went in the first round. Him going to Arkansas was just so he could play, so he could get on the field. It wasn't really one of those things. Some people look at transfers as you're running from competition. Not at all with Drew Sanders. Drew Sanders comes from a coaching family. He's an absolute dog that can play the edge. I'm a little nervous when I hear that he can play the edge because I still have PTSD, Ron and Thomas, from Baron Browning being converted to edge, all right?
Yeah.
I loved that man at the linebacker position, scouted him a few years ago at the Senior Bowl with Jonathan Cooper and Quinn Miners as well. but having versatility is the name of the game. While the Broncos may not have landed an edge defender in this draft, they do get some of that versatility with this cat in an emergency situation. Let's say Randy Gregory can't go. Let's say Baron Browning, that recovery from his injury doesn't work out. You get a little bit of a Swiss Army knife there, but this guy's an absolute dog.
Speaking of edge, or I guess maybe the Broncos, obviously Broncos didn't pick one. I guess what are your thoughts there as far as the Broncos not looking at the edge position in this draft and also defensive line?
It's disappointing, brother. It's disappointing. It's disappointing, just like the offensive line, right? I mean, I thought I was campaigning big on the bandwagon to go get a center early on. Hey, they got one later on. We're going to see what that works out to with Alex Forsyth, right, out of Oregon. I get that he's a versatile player. Just got done writing him and JL Skinner up. That article will be published on milehighhuddle.com really, really soon. But no, I'm disappointed, man. I think that you had an opportunity to get a guy like a Jobo out of Texas, who's an absolute dog. He's kind of that Draymond Jones replacement, if you will. I'm not sure how they're going to supplement a Draymond Jones. I'm not sure how they're going to supplement a pass rush, assuming Randy Gregory stays out of trouble and stays healthy. These are major, major concerns, but have no worries, fellas, because the draft might be over. The business day is not over. Down there at UC Health Training Center, we're going to see some undrafted free agents start to get trickled. My phone's been going off since I joined you guys. I haven't opened it up yet or anything, but the Broncos have got to be extremely active in this undrafted free agent market. They only had 5 picks coming into the draft. They stayed with 5 picks. They weren't in that specific order. But there was a lot of theory in the draft community that the Broncos were hosting late round guys so that they could kind of sway them over to Denver if they went undrafted, right? We all know the Philip Lindsay story. Almost went to Baltimore until mom pulled the trigger and said, stay in Denver. Sean Payton's trying to make some of those connections. George Payton's trying to make some of those connections in the pre-draft process. Maybe we see an edge, a defensive line, or an offensive tackle come in there.
Yeah, I would like to see the guy from Army that went undrafted, right? Some people thought he might go in the 4th round, and he went undrafted. Maybe see if we can get someone like that, to come in. Some sort of. I know they grabbed an edge out of Central Michigan. Don't know anything about him really, but
are you talking about Andre Carter?
Yeah.
Andre Carter went undrafted. Wow,
I believe so. Yeah.
I'm looking that up right now. Yeah, that would be a huge get for the Denver Broncos. Yep. I'm sure his phone is being blown up right now. He was at the Senior Bowl as well, fellas. And I think one of the big knocks for me on this young man, Andre Carter, is the fact that he's so lean as an edge rusher. But look where he's playing. He's in the Army, for crying out loud. The guy's out there running, doing cardio, one of the most physical human beings in the planet. He's not going to be having to run his ass off everywhere. They're going to be able to put him in the weight room. He's going to be able to eat. He's going to be able to get some of those calories. I love it. I thought that the big takeaway for the draft, while I still don't have a grade because I'm still trying to really dissect this whole thing, guys. I mean, it's really hard. You ride an emotional wave, right? I've got my favorites. I've got players I wish they stay away from. And then sometimes you think you know what direction they're going in. I'm going to be the first to say I have no idea what George Payton wants as an NFL scout. This is his 3rd draft, and things are just as different every single year. I mean, I had an idea that George Payton loves defensive backs. That was solidified today. But there are certain positions he likes to stay away from. I mean, he's only drafted really 1 inside linebacker this last class, if you're not counting Baron Browning. He stays away from the quarterback position. Tight end, very thin, although they got a new tight end from the New Orleans Saints. So there are definitely some curious moves, and you can't help but wonder, was that a George Payton pick or a Sean Payton pick when you look at these selections?
I said it right away. I think it's Sean Payton's fingerprints all over this draft. I feel like he was driving the draft from the start to finish, really. I mean, the aggressive moves up to go over after who they wanted, not playing real conservative. I feel like Sean Payton was pulling the trigger on most of it.
It looks like the Minnesota Vikings, speaking of George Payton, his old team, getting the best of them. We're starting to see some of these undrafted free agents come in. Carter getting signed by the Minnesota Vikings. It's going to be really interesting to see how the team responds in training camp, right? You're talking no OTAs, media silence. Rookies are probably being told right now, decline all interviews if you can, other than, after you first get picked. There's some strict rules and some strict guidelines that Sean Payton's putting in place. I've been told that Sean Payton likes to call surprise meetings as well, whether that's in the season or the off season at all hours of the day or night. He really wants to keep this team together and keep them on their toes, so to speak. This team hasn't won jack squat in a long time, and he wants to make sure that they know that. They're working in silence. It's like Big E used to say, right? Real bad boys move in silence. And that's what Sean Payton's doing with this Denver Broncos squad. When you start to look at the 5 players that they drafted, these aren't guys that you're going to see putting out workout videos.
Right.
Okay. These guys aren't going to be putting out clothing lines. These are dogs. They're football players, and they're here to work. We may wish that they win a different position in several different areas, but you've got good character guys who haven't gotten in any trouble. They're great athletes, they're good students, and they're good members in their community. Something you got to feel really, really happy about if you're a member of Broncos country looking at the next generation of players.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's the thing that I noticed too. They all seem to love football, right? They all seem to really love the game of football, and that's where it's got to start. I mean, yeah, you be really athletic and you can be a talented in that regard, but if you don't love the game, it's just something missing. There's always something missing. You're never going to get to that next step, it seems like. So I noticed that right away.
Yeah, and how do you respond to a competitive and pressure-filled environment? That's going to be the next test. As these guys get in the weight room, there's going to be rookie mini camp, things like that. Boys, training camp is going to be big this year. One-on-ones are back. No more of this let's play grab ass all summer at training camp with Nathaniel Hackett. That's not going to happen. Quite frankly, training camp was a waste of my time last year. Thomas, you were out there for a few days too. I mean, not a lot got done. That's going to change under Sean Payton. It already has. And if you expect these guys just to come in and compete for special teams, that's not why they're here. These guys are all starters. They're captains in their own right. They're leaders. They are meant to be on the football field. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to go out there and be the next Brock Purdy or Hall of Famers in their rookie year, but they're going to be asked to contribute immediately, whether that be on special teams or depth.
Absolutely. Yeah, I said that from the beginning. I said I think the top 3 draftees are going to be playing. I think, especially on special teams.
Yeah.
The Mims is going to be the punt returner, I believe, and then you've got 2 really solid, fast defensive players that are going to be on coverage. They're going to get a lot of time, and then I think the linebacker there, Sanders, is going to be used in some multiple situations where he comes in and kind of moves around a little bit and plays a little bit as a rookie on defense.
Outside, inside, I can see him definitely being used again. Pressure packages, as they highlighted last night, I can definitely just see him used all around. So definitely,
bingo. Ron just said it. Pressure packages. That's something different that the Broncos are going to see this year. And I know, Vance Joseph, not my favorite candidate, right? I wanted Rex Ryan, foot in your mouth guy, all that kind of thing. I wanted that guy, right? Because he loves to send the blitz. Vance Joseph is going to be tasked with becoming a new style of defensive coordinator, if you will. He's got a host of toys and a host of responsibility with those toys. Now, I want a defensive lineman. Ron wants one. We want more edge rushers. We need more guys in the trenches. But one of the best things that Drew Sanders does is being able to blitz the A and B gap, something that his game film just continually comes back to. And he's played all these games in the SEC, boys. That stuff, it just doesn't go to waste. Let's get to our guy Heath Holmes in here real quick, saying, good evening, gentlemen. Considering we really went hard after the O-line and free agency, I feel better about the secondary's reinforcements. We must preserve that defense and provide depth, balance. And I agree with Heath, because I think a common theme you saw in the AFC West is you're trying to either figure out how do we keep up with scoring points in Pat Mahomes and the Kansas City offense, or preventing points. Sean Payton, I get that he's an offensive mind. I've been told this man spends a majority of his time in practice with defensive backs. He values defensive backs a lot. Look at some of his players that he had with the New Orleans Saints. Look at who he's bringing over from the New Orleans Saints as well. I mean, you're getting a running back in Tony Jones Jr., offensive player. You're getting a tight end. I hear you. But at the same time, Sean Payton understands George Payton's wishes of cornerback is a premium position. So they go out and get defensive backs. I like it. I think Riley Moss was definitely a surprise for me. I'm liking the pick more and more. But you can't have enough defensive backs. You really can't. It's a pass happy league. There are some that say the running back is coming back into the fold. Maybe running backs are expected to catch the ball now a lot more. But I think really when you look at Kansas City, when you look at the Chargers, what they're gearing up for on offense, you saw what the Raiders did in this last draft. You have got to be ready to supplement the cornerback position, because if you're expecting to just go Pat Surtain versus your number one and find success all day, that's not going to work. These AFC West teams have more than one weapon. So I think the Broncos are definitely gearing up for that.
Yeah. And speaking of secondary, so I looked it up when I was talking about maybe being Justin Simmons' replacement. After this season, they have an out in his contract that there's not much dead cap. And then after that, the next year, even if he sticks around 24, he's unrestricted free agent. So that safety pick was pretty important. Seeing that they only had 4 on the roster to begin with, that was an important pick. I hope he pans out.
Yeah, well, and I don't know about you boys. I mean, Caden Stearns is a nice enough guy, I guess, but I don't see a huge future there at the safety position with Caden Stearns. I mean, he is out of position consistently. And when you look at these draft selections, you kind of see the writing on the wall for some of these players. Caden Stearns is one of them. Talk about, Mims. What does that mean for KJ Hamler? We talk about wide receivers. Yeah. I mean, KJ Hamler can't stay out of the rehab room, and time waits for no one, I guess, through no fault of his own. But we've seen time and time again these speed demons come in that are undersized, and they can't seem to stay healthy, whether that's through being too explosive in their own athletic feats to having bad luck. I don't know what it is, but getting Mims here, Marvin Mims, is certainly one of those writings on the wall for KJ Hamler for me. I mean, it's kind of, I think Sean Payton has seen his career at just a glance and is looking at it like, who's going to be available for me? Mims is a guy that's going to be an inside threat. He's going to play a lot of slot. It'll be interesting to see what that means for Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. Again, that 5th-year option for Jerry Jeudy just days away.
I said that the first thing I said. KJ Hamler's days are pretty much numbered with Mims being on the roster, because you can't stay healthy. Yeah. I like KJ Hamler. He's fun to watch, but if he's not on the field, I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't decide to package him up with a couple others and see if they can get something for a package. Future draft picks or something.
And Montrell Washington as well, Luke. Right? As a those days are numbered. And as much as we love KJ Hamler, right? He was brought in for that, to take over that speedy receiver role, but to your point, he just can't stay on the field. And bring in a guy like Mims, explosion, quick twitch, ball tracking ability, out the woodworks. I can see Peyton, using him in certain play designs to help this offense out, especially down the field vertically. Definitely to be able to challenge those defenses down the field vertically is definitely kind of his impact.
Yeah, and just to add to that and piggyback off of what you said, Ron, I mean, Kendall Hinton, great story. Available, a football player. I have so much respect for him. I'm not going to say I love him because he's in Canton, because that was just an embarrassment for the NFL and the Denver Broncos. But what this man has given to this football team is just exemplary. It's what you want out of anybody who is just given an opportunity or a chance. And while I love the Kendall Hinton story, I love winning more. And I think in this crowded room, that writing is kind of on the wall as well. Gyla Maples coming in here, giving us some huge love. We appreciate you so much, saying it's great to see you guys. I've been on vacation, so I need to catch up. Thanks for getting me up to speed. That's right. The 2023 Denver Broncos draft is officially in the books. They started with 5 picks. They ended with 5 picks. They did 3 trades, fellas. We were talking about that too. That was a big one, and I wanted to get your guys' takes on it. I mean, I said it right away, surprised to see him trade up and go get a wide receiver, but to see 2 more trades in addition to that first day 2 trade was very, very surprising. Sean Payton came out and said, I'm the spender, George is the saver. I think that was very honest, very revealing, and very accurate.
Yeah, I think the trades were okay. I think the trade up in the second round was, I talked about a little bit early as far as value. It wasn't bad. They didn't really lose much when you talk about the actual, what they gave up to move up a little bit. So I wasn't too disappointed with that. Plus they picked a position that typically, when you look at the analytics, pans out in the second round more often than many of the other positions. So I didn't mind it at all. That trade up from into the third again, back into the third round to get Riley Moss, they lost some value in that. They really did. I know they swapped third rounders, but they gave a 4th rounder to jump up there. So they did lose some value. I wasn't really happy with that trade, but again, they went up to get someone that they liked. Now I'll also say analytics show that cornerback is the most reached for position in the draft, and many of them don't pan out. So I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that trade actually works out.
Yeah, agree. The first trade to get Mims, I'm okay with, and that has Sean Payton fingerprints written all over it. They moved up to get their guy and want to make sure that they got him. The one back into the what's around there, Thomas, I agree with that. You're losing some value because there were still a lot of good players on the board at that time, but just moving back to go up, it's just I wasn't the biggest fan. But at the end of the day, that the trades, based on where they picked, even with everything in place, they got good value for the most part. So
And
Yeah, they
the
got
second
good
trade
value.
too. Sorry, go
Go
ahead,
ahead,
Luke.
Tom.
I
I
was
was
just going
gonna
to
say,
say
yeah,
that next trade that they had, they got a player who's already established. They didn't have to waste a pick on a tight end and hoping he pans out. They know
There you go.
Troutman can play. He's not a impact player yet, but they know he can play. So that trade actually worked out pretty well.
Yeah, he's an unknown to us, but a known to Sean Payton, right? And when
That's
you
right.
talk about your knowns and your unknowns, I think this is a circumstance in this draft and maybe even free agency where George Payton and Sean Payton are good for each other. Sean Payton can probably get George a little bit more talked into, let's go take this risk. Let's go make a blockbuster deal, right? And then if you're George, you could probably look at Sean and say, let's settle down a little bit, partner. Well, this is a long haul. We need to execute some patience. So I think this might be a good marriage, right? I don't know if it's a marriage made in heaven or whatever the saying is. That reveals to be seen. I still think, just like you guys, Sean Payton had the final call on this draft, but I think it shows his leadership, something I've been talking about since he was my number one candidate, that he's able to delegate. And George Payton knows what Sean wants because Sean tells him. Sean doesn't, you don't have to guess what Sean Payton wants. He's going to come out and tell you whether you like it or not. I do still wonder about that funny little video that's circulating around the internet too. Is anyone in Denver media going to have the courage to ask Coach about it? They didn't invite me on the last few press conferences, and that's probably why. But I wanted to get to Angelica here real quick, because I think Angelica Hernandez is bringing up another need that we're not talking about because it's not fun. It's not sexy, but it happened for some teams in this last draft. And she's saying, I still think we need to bring in a kicker because Brandon McManus ain't it. Ron, I've made my disdain for Brandon McManus very known on MHI and these MHH airwaves for a long time. Now, I respect and appreciate what this man has done, not only for this football team and community, but for the NFL as a whole. That being said, I think it's probably his time, and I think it's time to at least look at kickers. I wouldn't be shocked to see a kicker come in to at least try to compete with him. It happened last year for just a little bit, but when you see the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan trading up to replace Robbie Gould, that pretty much tells me all I need to know. Kicker is a very important position. It's not fun to talk about. It's not fun to scout. I don't think I've ever scouted one in my entire life. But, I was up at CSU last spring, fellas, for the CSU Pro Day, looking at Trey McBride, and some kicker named Stonehouse is out there for the Titans just drilling balls. Never even heard of him because I didn't take the time to look. That's making me kind of change my element as looking at the punters and the kickers a little bit. I would have liked to see a kicker added. That being said, we talk about things being very luxurious for the Denver Broncos. Kicker. Yep. How would you boys feel if kicker would have been a draft selection? It'd be very rich, but maybe welcome.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if it were draft selection, because I agree with you and Angelica here of, kicker may not, from the surface, it may not be like the most important need, right? But it definitely is important. And we have to look at what McManus has been these past few years, and it's been lackluster at best, right? Anything obviously in that 40 to 50 range, okay, but anything above 50, it's a coin flip. So even special teams, in coverage, it's not good. So I mean, it leaves a lot to be desired over these past few years, and I wouldn't be mad now. Then bring in someone. I can see them maybe bringing someone for competition. For sure. But yeah, we definitely would be a big upgrade over McManus for sure. We definitely need that.
My thoughts on this, Luke. I think it's a luxury pick that they didn't have the opportunity to really take with 5 picks. I mean, I don't know. It was like comparing it to taking Stinson Benson in the later
Would
rounds.
you
It's like
believe that?
it's a
I
luxury.
thought I used to think Sean McVay was a smart guy until I saw that move. But no, I mean, maybe these guys know something we don't. I mean, I don't ever like to call myself a draft expert because I'm wrong more times than I'm right. I head into these drafts and I have players that I really like and I try to identify as best as I can for a fit for the Broncos.
Yep.
Hardly ever works out. I mean, I got one guy that I really, really wanted in JL Skinner from this last draft class. I'll take it. Look, just because I got one guy that I really wanted doesn't mean that these other four guys can't play and that they're not good picks. We have to remember that when we're criticizing these cats. I'm driving around to my volleyball game for my little girl here in the Mile High City, and I'm hearing on the radio, JL Skinner had a horrible Senior Bowl practice. Okay, that's an opinion. That's fair. Tell me why. But at the same time, the guy hasn't even gotten into town yet. We're willing to go at him for a Senior Bowl practice that you may not have thought went well, that I thought did go well. That's all going to be just naysay and BS come training camp, because it doesn't matter how he did the Senior Bowl when you're in the dog days of summer and Sean Payton's training camp. How well can you compete? How well can you retain information? These are things that these young guys have been tested on, and at first glance, they've passed the Sean Payton and George Payton test in coming in and being selected. So I think it's very exciting. I can see why Broncos country's frustrated, right? We're talking about luxury picks. Quarterback, right? What's the deal? The quarterback, you saw a historic run in the quarterback position. Most quarterbacks ever selected, 11 in the first 150 in the common draft era, the most amount of quarterbacks ever. The Broncos don't take one. Kind of odd. I've been scratching my head about the Jarrett Stidham thing for a long time. I think Sean Payton may know something that we don't. Maybe quarterback's another one of those undrafted free agent positions we see here in a few hours.
It's possible. And I was said this right out the gate, talking about these draft picks. It may not have been who I thought they should go for as far as positions, but when I look at the actual players taken, I like them all pretty much. I mean, there's some question marks around them all, but I can't argue with the value and the actual what I would say the player that they got. They got players, they got good players. And so I can't argue with it. Maybe I want them to take a different position. I want them to take center. I thought that's a huge weak link that's on an otherwise pretty solid offensive line. But when I look at the players themselves, I like the Mims pick. I like the Sanders pick. And I actually like the Skinner pick. I don't know enough about Riley Moss to say one way or the other, really. But I like those three picks fairly well.
Yeah, it's hard to say, right? I mean, the draft just ended, and it's overwhelming and underwhelming experience all at the same time, right? But when we step back and let's not look at things from a Broncos perspective right now. Let's look at things from a national perspective. The Denver Broncos have made blockbuster moves the last 2 years in a row. Trading for Russell Wilson, huge. Trading for Sean Payton, huge. Dealing away Bradley Chubb, huge. It's okay if not every transaction is a Hollywood blockbuster transaction. In fact, that's one of the reasons I do feel good about Sean Payton keeping this anti-media, let's work in silence approach. The Broncos have worked in the public eye for way too long, going back to George Payton waking up at 4 a.m. and going through the draft process. I don't need to see all that. Don't tell me how hard you work. Show me how hard you work. We're all going to know how hard these guys have been working come this summer and come preseason.
Yep. And it's going to translate to wins. If they work hard enough and they've got the talent, that it should be wins on the field. And I'm expecting wins, right? I'm expecting
starters are going to play. You better you have your ass ready to play, regardless of where you're on the depth chart. Sean Payton said it's already going to happen. So if you think you're just some solidified offensive lineman, maybe a Garrett Bowles that you've earned your left tackle position, you're coming back from injury. You better be here ready to work, man.
That's right.
The trade deadline is still in effect, folks. I know we're a long way from it, but don't be surprised if you see Sean Payton make some moves. We do have a thick wide receiver room. Maybe that's intriguing to some other people. Now, I don't think Sean's going to be calling saying, hey, do you want Cortland? Do you want Jerry? Who do you want? Because I'm just selling. That's not the case at all. You try to do the best with what you have, but that doesn't mean you can't continue to bring in new talent. I think Mims signals a new era for the wide receivers. I like his humble approach. It's one of the first things I like to look in a player. Who's the human being? And based off of everything that I can see and everything that I've read, this man comes from a great family. He's extremely self-motivated. And those things go a long way when you read articles and you see things, including my own articles up at milehighhuddle.com saying, look, Mims is not an ideal fit for an expert route runner. He doesn't have excessive route tree knowledge at the University of Oklahoma, but he's a young man that's smart, he's intelligent, he's a tough worker, he's humble, and he's ready to learn. That's the most important part. You see some of these guys get drafted, and for me, it's their biggest day on the stage. So if they're saying, let's go, and they're all excited, I'm with it. Some guys, it looks like when they get drafted, that's the end of their journey. Right? Like, I've made it. This is it. I've made the mountaintop. Other guys, especially these 5 guys for the Denver Broncos, regardless of what we think where they were picked, they're appreciative, they're hungry, and it seems like they're ready to get to work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. I love it. Luke, you got me all fired up. I was having fun with the draft, but now I'm fired up. I can't.
You guys got me fired up, man. Thank you guys so much for having me on the Orange and Blue View, guys. Every Saturday night, Ron and Tom are rocking this on 6 p.m. Mountain. Be sure to head on over to Twitter. Follow both these guys at Thomas Hall NFL on Twitter, at Ron White NFL, and yours truly at Luke Patterson LP. Should have a JL Skinner and an Alex Forsyth article coming out here in just about an hour.
Yep. And we look forward to reading that, man. I look forward to reading it because I'm excited to know more about them. Also, I put an article about the values of trades, so check that one out. Should be coming out. For Ron, myself, and Luke, thank you for joining. We're going to say goodbye. It's way past the top of the hour. So thank you for everyone that joined. And just we'll grab, Michael, the legend.
Yeah.
Here. Awesome job, Luke. And I can't say it yet. Thank you so much for joining, man.
Oh, man, this is a team effort, guys. This is a team effort here at MHH, man. This isn't my show. This is your show. I appreciate you guys having me on. Ron, you've been killing it in the draft coverage. I see what you do. Tom, same thing, man. We've got a hard team of guys that are working so hard right now at milehighhuddle.com. I know that we just provided multiple hours of podcasting coverage. I've done that. You've done that. It's exhausting. So it's cool, man, to see such a hardworking group come together for something we love so much. Some guys, including Nick Kendall, he's Nick Kendall sick in the head. He's already planning the next draft. I can already tell you right now. I've been texting with Nick off the air, and some guys, man, they just absolutely love the draft. We love the draft, and we love the Denver Broncos. So get ready for some exciting football. Things are changing in Mile High City.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Luke. And with that, we're going to say goodbye and go Broncos.
Thank you, guys.